Welcome to the Marion Institute's South Coast Food Policy Council quarterly meeting. Today, we are going to move through a lot of different pieces. So at any moment, you can just unmute yourself and ask a question or raise your hand. That'd be great. We are recording this, and I'm going to be sharing the notes and the PowerPoint back out to everybody who registered. So for today, we are going to start with our land acknowledgement, which is what we do in every quarterly meeting. We're going to review the mission, and then we're going to take a look at each of the working groups. We have initiatives in each working group, and we have policies. So we're basically going to do a year in review for all the work we've done in those initiative and policy areas. And then we're going to talk about the recent SNAP issues that occurred because of the shutdown and what's happened and where we are now. And then we're going to talk about what's going to come up in 2026. All make sense so far? All right, we're going to start with this. So I'm going to take a few moments. If you could just take that time and read this to yourself, this helps ground us in the actual place that we live in. Okay? All right. So for those of you who are new to our work, our mission is to convene, connect, and advocate for local food producers, consumers, community members who seek policy and systems that strengthen our regional food system, improve community health, and eliminate food security. So I know some of you are new to this. So we really started looking at this particular work during the pandemic, and Liz was actually, as our executive director of the Marion Institute, was actually the one convening groups during the pandemic. And afterwards, we started developing this particular work in the policy side. We published the 2021 Southeastern Massachusetts Food System Assessment, and we convened about 30 different community members and called them the Community Advisory Board. When we did that, we looked at the data that came out of the food system assessment and we identified different priorities. We put working groups around those priorities. And so that's what we're going to be talking about is the particular work that we do to push those priorities forward. So the first thing we did was we created an education and communication working group. The understanding is that you can't actually engage people in the work of the food system or in the work of policy without actually educating the public on the actual food system. Very few people actually understand the food system or even have heard that term before. So we made a concerted effort to really focus our work on it in this particular area. So one of the ways we educate people is through our Eat Local South Coast Challenge. The idea is that during the summer, you could see up on the top left, we actually have 4 weeks where people receive emails once a week with food system information, different opportunities to gauge into the local food, and it's usually during the summer. We provide different videos to watch, books to read, podcasts to listen to, and a host of other resources during those 4 weeks. So we've increased the number of people every year, and recently we increased it by 27%. And we do surveys afterwards to help see if there's been a behavior change within that process. And yes, recently we noted in this past year, 70% of those surveyed say they are making a lifestyle change. They're either visiting more farmers markets and that behavior change, or they're actually making personal behavior changes in how they buy food. So I think this is a great way to engage the public in understanding the food system. The second thing we do is the Food Summit. And this year we had about 90 people that attended the Strengthening Aquaculture through Wastewater Advocacy Food Summit, which resulted now we are currently forming an aquaculture coalition. And this is led by CMAP, the South Coast Food Policy Council, New Bedford Ocean Cluster, the Aquaculture Association, the Massachusetts Aquaculture Association, and Buzzards Bay Coalition. So together we are actively forming an aquaculture coalition to look at that industry, what challenges they're facing, and see if we can work in pushing some policy initiatives forward that will really help this industry in our region. The other piece that we work on that really helps now, that's going to help people understand the food system, is our Farm Coast documentary. So currently, we're working with Ethan de Aguilar on a documentary that's really going to work with educating the community and legislators on the issues that confront farmers and aquaculture fishermen and fishermen in general. To understand in our region, what are those challenges? And so we're going to really focus on that, and it's going to be released next fall, that documentary. So those are the main initiatives that we work on in this particular group. And the policies that we work on are two in this particular working group. We're working on the Farm to School Fresh Grant, which actually provides money for foods for schools to actually procure more local food. And this is an important part of the actual pandemic recovery. This actual bill started during the pandemic because the schools were saying we can't find any local food during that time. And so this bill is now continued, and we want to make this a permanent part of DESE, the Department of Secondary and Elementary Education, that this grant will continue forward to buy local food for schools. They can actually implement curriculum using this funding, and they can do things like infrastructure build out, like raised garden beds. So this is an important fund that we want to push forward and make permanent. The other piece is the food literacy bill. And that particular bill is really looking at how can we make this standard across all school systems in Massachusetts. So the bill would actually say to DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, create education standards on food literacy from K to 12. This will be embedded into all different levels of education and different classroom settings to really understand the food system. So we're trying to make this a permanent part of our education that kids are receiving. So both pieces are working towards really embedding all the food system education across the board in the school system. And all those initiatives are for the adults in the space to understand better the food system. I'm going to stop there. Any questions, or anybody been through the local South Coast Challenge or gone to a food summit of ours? Okay.
I'll just add that the Food Summit, and Christine mentioned that we had about 90 people attend that. It was in person at UMass Dartmouth. So a really incredible turnout. And for those of you that are not following along of what's happening with aquaculture these days, it's really important. I mean, this is a critical food resource for our region. It's a high protein food resource for our region. I think people tend to think of aquaculture as like fancy food, but it shouldn't, because it's such an important industry and a part of our economy in the in southeastern Mass. And what's happening right now is that aquaculture shell fishermen's farm sites, aquaculture sites, are being closed down for extended period of times due to combined sewer overflows. So without municipal upgrades to the wastewater treatment facilities, these CSOs, or combined sewer overflows, during superstorms, which now we're having all the time, overflow, and it is proactively, Division of Marine Fisheries is shutting those aquaculture sites in those regions down. And then they get shut down for upwards of 20 days before the site gets retested. So there's a lot of issues going on with it. It's putting aquaculture, out of business. Like, lots of shell fishermen are having to close their farm sites because they have been out of work for 160 plus days this past year, and that was in September or early October when we had this meeting and we were getting report outs. So we are finally in a situation. We've been monitoring this for the last few years, for sure, since the CSO closures started, and finally our representatives Markey and Sylvia and Senator Montigny have put legislation forward to create uh, a finance committee that would look at addressing the CSO closures and the issues that are happening. So it's the first time that we have some of our legislators putting forward policy that could start to address these issues. So we felt like it was really important for us to finally take the lead on leading a coalition. To date, we have been part of coalitions, unlike these policies that Christine's just describing, and she's going to explain more as we go through our other working groups. But we are part of like the Farm to School and Food Literacy Coalition. We are part of the SNAP Coalition, but we're not as a policy council, we haven't to date led a coalition. And so this is our first like dipping our toe into it, which is just sort of exciting because one, it's an important thing that we're doing, but it's also really showing some of the growth that we're having as a regional food policy council. So I just want to really elevate that work and the importance that it's having regionally.
Thank you, Liz. That's great.
Yep.
Any questions about what Liz shared or what I shared? Okay. All right. All right. The next working group we have is the Food Access Working Group. And one of the initiatives that came out of the food system assessment data that we decided upon as a priority is that gleaning is nascent in our area. We have Boston area greeners, we have Martha's Vineyard, they have there's there's stuff in Rhode Island, but here we don't. And the other initiative that became it was a priority that became initiative is the farm to food pantry. That was clear that there wasn't enough going on when we made these decisions. So we took those two priorities and we turned them into programs. So now we have Frogfoot Farm. And Frogfoot Farm, we grow the food there that is then going to food being donated to food pantries. And the Feeds to Families is actually a gleaning program where we are 1,500 farms in our area. And we work with farmers and we work with volunteers. And we train the volunteers on Frogfoot Farm to go to different farms and harvest the food that will then go to the food pantries that are closest to that farm. So these two priorities that came up, gleaning is nascent and the farm to food pantries, those actually crystallized into real programs. So we're really proud of that. The other priority that became a program is partially cooked and ready to eat food. One of the things that became apparent, especially with unsheltered communities, is they don't have the ability, even if they went to a food pantry and got food, they couldn't necessarily make the food that they got at the food pantry. Maybe they don't have a microwave, maybe they don't have an oven. So actually getting prepared food to people, like through Meals on Wheels and different avenues, is actually really important. So what we did is we actually grow the food at Frogfoot and we put together a group that is working on this called For Cooks for Community. So the food is grown and then given to the Minkle brothers, who then are chefs. They put together prepared food and then is given to South Coast Health that have a mobile pantry that go into Fall River right now. And they do health checks in the community. At the same time, they are giving out this food to the unsheltered community. Liz, you want to say more on that?
Yeah, they're just doing it's not a mobile pantry. It's just through their wellness visits. So the wellness team is going out into unsheltered communities, and when they're doing their wellness checks, they're just bringing some of these hot meals out to the individuals that they're working with. So very cool program that we're thrilled to have been working on with South Coast Health.
Thanks, Liz. Awesome.
Yep.
The other initiative that we were doing during the pandemic and we resurrected this year again is emergency food resource meetings. We were hearing from the community that there's a lot of different things that were happening, and we started this up again in the summer. And we wanted to listen to the community and see what was really going on. So one of the things we heard early on in the summer is that ICE was in different places across the South Coast. So we invited Mira to come, the Massachusetts Immigration and Refugee Assistance Coalition, to come in and do a training for Know Your Rights for community partners. And that was an important part of the work that we were doing. And then, of course, we were hearing lots of issues around SNAP has now been changed. So what do we do with that? So we invited Pat Baker from the Mass Law Reform Institute, who leads the SNAP Coalition, to come in November and give us an update. It just so happened that it worked out, not in necessarily in a good way, but October, the federal government shut down, which put us all, everybody in the food pantries, everybody on SNAP, into emergency mode because they said, oh, there's no SNAP money coming in November into the state. So we all the different coalitions that work on SNAP and food, emergency food, got together, including Governor Healey's office, which put together the Anti-Hunger Relief Task Force, of which Liz is a member for the Marion Institute. But it is through these emergency weekly meetings now that we are really hearing more from the community. And it's really finding out what are the common trends that we're seeing, what are the common problems, how can we connect people to resources, what else do we need to provide in education and information. So these meetings are important for the community just to connect those pieces. Liz, you want to say anything else around that? Okay. And then we've had since the pandemic the South Coast Food Alert. So within that, these different groups that meet or don't meet, that are food pantries or food providers, can actually share resources through our listserv. Maybe somebody has an extra pallet of chicken, and so they're like, anybody, if you can come get it, here we are. So it's a way for us to share resources in that way. So those are the initiatives from this particular working group. I'm going to stop there. Any questions about any of those particular pieces so far for the initiatives?
Can you just elaborate a little bit? So the weekly emergency meetings, those are happening all around the state, with,
No, that,
or is
well,
that
if the
unique
invite can
to?
go out across the state, yeah, people are welcome to join. But it was specifically set up initially for the South Coast. Liz, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so Melanie, these were when during the pandemic we were hosting weekly emergency meetings. We ended that, and when we ended it after the pandemic, we set up the South Coast Food Alert listserv so that that connection and networking could continue to happen when people had like real-time questions or they had food that they were looking to offload someplace else. And then obviously in January, after the administration came, new administration came on board, people are like, we got to fire up those emergency food meetings. And as we all know, it was sort of a slow burn at the beginning. And then by like April, we were like, okay, there's enough, people are asking for it enough that we started them up again, but we were doing them monthly. And then obviously it went to weekly during November because the need became so intense and people were just like, so just to kind of give everybody a little bit of perspective that's new here. So Christine walked through sort of how we are organized as the South Coast Food Policy Council, and we work with our core group of community advisory board members that sit on each of these working groups that she's walking you through. But we also have about, over 2,200 people that are just members at large that are following the work of just the SFPC, just the Food Policy Council of what the Marion Institute is doing. So that's, and then so the emergency food resource meetings are for anybody and everybody. It's not, you don't have to be part of our cab to participate in it. It's kind of like this. We do these quarterly meetings for the general public at large, just to give everybody who's interested in following us an update on like what have we done and where have we, what have we been achieving and what have we been working on and how do you lean in a little bit more. So the food emergency resource meetings, again, are a little bit different. They're very strategic as far as like social service agencies are on the calls, food pantry, food relief organizations, some farmers and farmer representation. And it's really just trying to be like connecting dots from week to week of like, what are we seeing? What are the needs? What are the gaps? Just like we did during the pandemic and trying to fill that role. I think that we will reassess in the new year as far as whether or not it's helpful to continue to have those weekly or if they should go back to monthly. But again, this is like we're navigating a very different situation than we were navigating during the pandemic, right? This is like a lots of like starts and stops and what we're definitely seeing is, there's an increased need out there in the food pantries and their numbers are way up. But we're also seeing like so far there's been enough food, right, to cover it. There's been concern about having enough food, but it's certainly like there has been, and people are not they're not running out of food yet. So we're just going to have to sort of play that by ear. I don't know if that I just wanted to sort of give a little
No,
more
that's
context
great. Very
on it.
helpful. Thank you. Great context.
Perfect. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So we'll talk about the policies in this particular working group. There are two. We work on the Healthy Initiatives Incentives Program, which is HIP. So if you are a SNAP recipient, you are automatically receive HIP. You can use your HIP funds, which is $40 to $80 depending on the SNAP household size, at a HIP vendor, which is a farmer. So it's specifically meant to buy local produce, local vegetables and fruit from farmers. And we have a HIP farmer on our call. Laura Smith from Lane Gardens is a HIP vendor and does work in different communities to help people both learn about the HIP and also to be growing the food and then giving it directly to folks that are SNAP recipients as well. So this particular bill has been up and running and we're trying to make it permanent since 2017, but we have a really good chance of making it through this particular session. This will become permanent part of DTA if this works. And even if you have 1 penny on your SNAP EBT card, you can still use your full amount on your HIP. This is a huge benefit, and a large percentage of our elderly population use HIP. People with our veteran population use HIP. Our people with disabilities. This is a very specific set of vulnerable people that having healthy access to healthy food is really important. So the other bill that we're working on is the Basic Needs Assistance for Massachusetts Immigrant Residents, which is essentially state-funded SNAP for Massachusetts immigrant residents. This is a very specific bill that we're actually resurrecting from early on in like 2009. In that time period, Massachusetts had this as a program for many years. So if you fit the particular criteria, you were eligible for SNAP if you were an immigrant. So we want to bring this back because many immigrants coming into the country are frozen out of the federal benefits. So this would be a state-funded SNAP situation for a very specific set of immigrants. So we're really supporting this as well. Some of the things we have done in this area, we have for HIP, we've had a lobby day at the State House that we work across the state in a coalition, Massachusetts Food System Collaborative, and we all come together to lobby at the State House. And we've had 8 or 9 of our community advisory board members come with us to meet with 16 or so different legislators to talk about the importance of making HIP permanent and funding it. And then we've also have 3 food equity advisors. And every single bill that we work on, every situation for HIP, they are providing testimony, both oral testimony during a hearing and written testimony, and they've come with us to the State House. So there's a lot of other pieces we've done with HIP, but these are some of the outstanding pieces. Any questions on these 2 bills that we're working on? Okay. All right, the next is our policy working group. Obviously, policy is a big piece to what the Food Policy Council does. But in this particular year, we worked on some very specific initiatives. One, we wanted to capture stories. This started at the beginning of the year in January. We're actually hearing from our congressional representatives and senators to actually find stories to share with them because the big, beautiful bill was coming out, cutting out SNAP and actually unenrolling a lot of people that are in SNAP for a variety of regulations. So we started capturing stories, just thinking about it from a congressional level, and started looking at how do we capture stories to the state level. So we started doing a lot of interviews, and we actually have like a kind of a folder of a lot of different stories of all the different bills that we work on. And we use those stories in testimony because the best testimony you can provide is a mix of data and storytelling. So that was a big initiative, and this is going to be an ongoing initiative. We want new stories coming through, so legislators hear those voices coming through from the community. The other initiative that we started this past year is the Lunch and Learn issue briefings. We realized that people are not going to do any of the policy action alerts that we send out unless they're more informed on the issues. So we started doing issue briefings on each of the bills that we're working on. And in that issue briefing, we would actually take direct action because we have the technology. So people would just put in their name and address, and off their letter goes to the particular legislator on that particular bill. And that was often the first time that people actually did any advocacy at all. So it was very much, getting that first time in a public setting where I was actually making phone calls to legislators to kind of see like this is actually doable. And now you don't have to make a phone call. You can just use this technology and off you go. So the other piece that we started last year was Action Alert technology through Action Network. So in one fiscal year, we 612 members at large took action on 11 action alerts. This is great, and we want to improve that number over time. And we're hoping that through these issue briefings that we'll have more of, that will actually get more people involved in taking action in contacting their legislators. I'm going to stop there. Any questions so far? Have any of you like just done a simple action alert? It doesn't have to be with us on other coalitions that may belong to. It's a simple thing, but it's actually really important to do. And something my social psychologist professor always told us was if you're not taking the action to promote that bill, somebody else is taking action against it. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I'll just
For
add like a fun thing that we did this past week actually is we started to work with our Grow Education program. So there's, another program of the Marion Institute, and getting all of the kids that are participating in our Grow Education program, which is 24 schools now in 6 different school districts, filling out postcards to their legislators of why they like participating in a farm to school program and what vegetables they're growing in their garden and what's their favorite and blah, blah, blah. And pleased to support some of these bills, especially the food literacy and the farm to school bill. And so that's kind of a cool, like how we're blending some of our programs, but also the power behind getting a stack of postcards from a bunch of third grade kids is, incredibly powerful and meaningful to pushing some of these things forward. So we're trying to attack it from all these different angles for sure.
Thank you, Liz. That's great.
I
Now
can
the
add,
policy, yeah, go ahead, Laura.
as you know, I do that as well. As a hip farmer, I get testimony from my customers. I also submit testimony on my own behalf as what HIP does for my farm business. And I'm also a trustee for Bristol County Agricultural High School. And the school has received the farm to school grants in the past. And so the students and the teachers there I've gotten them to submit testimony.
Nice, Laura. Good job at that. Laura's a dedicated advocate, is always coming with us to the State House and writing letters to legislators. So thank you, Laura. All right, so policies. We work on 2 policies in this particular group as well. First is equity in agriculture. This is an essential answer to one of our priorities is how do we better support communities that are Black, Indigenous, and people of color to be in farming and in food work. So this particular bill establishes a commission to do the research. The commission is comprised of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and the research will be done by them, and all the policy recommendations will be done by them. And this is a key piece to really help build out more people getting into agriculture. So we're promoting this and we're supporting this. We give testimony on this, and this is a key piece, and it answers one of our priorities in this particular area. The other particular monster piece that we work on is less about a particular policy and it's more on the system itself, and that is the budget. The budget in Massachusetts is every year, and it's about a 6 month process that we work on, and we support a lot of different pieces in the food system itself. Just to name a few, I will go through some. We work to support all the funding for the Healthy Incentive Program, the food literacy that we talked about earlier, the Farm to School bill, the Massachusetts Emergency Food Assistance Program. So that's all the money that goes into the 4 food banks across the state. So then they can buy the food that goes to all the food pantries. The Food Policy Council grant, the Coastal Food Shed, which is our local food hub aggregator, they had an earmark and we support their work as well. The buy locals like CMAP, Southeastern Massachusetts Agriculture Partnership, we also support their funding and we do advocacy on that. UMass Extension, that actually trains farmers and provides resources for them. Mass in Motion, which is our local Mass in Motion in Fall River, we support the funding for that. The Massachusetts Food Trust it offers grants and it offers loans to different food industries to actually build out their work. And MDAR staffing, the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, we support. So those are the food pieces in the budget that we really advocate for an entire 6 months. We do a lot of advocacy and a lot of action alerts on co-sponsorship for these different bills. These are all the foundational pieces that keep that whole food system moving. And we successfully advocated for over $84 million in our food system this past year. So we're really happy about that. That will continue into the coming year. We're now getting ready and moving forward on figuring out what are the dollar amounts that we want to ask now for each budget item and to make sure that the governor has in our budget. Any questions on any of these pieces now? Okay. So we'll move forward into the capacity building working group. So in the capacity building working group, our priorities were to really build a food infrastructure piece, our food innovative district. And we found over time that we really didn't have enough data. And we looked around for something, an assessment that we could use to figure out what are the gaps and assets we have in our region that we could really work on to figure out what do we need to build? How many food hubs do we need? Which distribution areas do we need? How many aggregators do we need? All those particular pieces. And we're not just looking at this from just the South Coast. We're looking at the entire food shed. So we found something called the CARROT, the Community and Agricultural Resiliency Audit Tool. And what we've done is we have within the South Coast Food Policy Council, we started with Bristol County and we launched that process in Bristol County. And it's basically a tool that has 101 indicators and in 7 themes. So as a community advisory board, together we tried to answer all these questions. And then we actually started looking, okay, we need to do this across different counties. So we launched the Carrot Community Practice within 6 southeastern Massachusetts leads. So you can see there Norfolk County, Bristol, Plymouth, Duke, Nantucket, and Barnstable. And we initiated the Carrot within those community advisory boards. So we helped create those working groups that are working just to answer these particular 101 indicators. And we already conducted 2 focus groups with individuals with lived experience in hunger in Fall River and New Bedford that kind of looked at some of those questions as well. And then we want to take all this information and synthesize this into our next food system assessment, which will be published in late 2026. I'm going to stop there. Liz, you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I think it's just important to note that with this capacity building working group and the work that we've been doing within the Food Policy Council and just the food space work that we've been doing in general, the importance of this is like kind of massive. I mean, one of the biggest barriers for us to really get more local food into the food relief system even just our regular grocery stores and retail chains and outlets and our restaurants is that we have outsourced our supply chain, right, from producers to the end user. So think about like your aggregators and your processors and your distributors and all of those supply chain components that get food from farmers and fishermen and aquaculture to your table, right, to the end user. That's been all outsourced over the last 50 years to an industrial food system. So the importance of us, if we're really serious about getting to the root cause of how to address food insecurity and how to and how to build a resilient regional food system, we need to rebuild that supply chain. But because we operate in a food shed that covers a wide range, we can't just work in isolation in one county. So this process of working with all the other counties in southeastern Mass is really important. And then to be able to do that effectively, where we are elevating the people and the stakeholders in that county is really important. Like we can do that well here in Bristol County, but I can't do that well in Barnstable County or Dukes County. Like there's other people that are, leading those efforts there that need to be elevated. And so what we started to do was identify county leads, which we've done now. We have county leads in all these counties. We've started to create a community of practice in which we are meeting with those county leads monthly, and we're giving them the tools and the training to basically do what we did here, which was create a community advisory board of food system stakeholders, so their own CABs in their counties, that they are then going to be able to do this carrot process with. But in addition, there's twofold, right? In one way, we're going to get tons of data that is social infrastructure data in these regions that we weren't able to get and put into our 2021 food system assessment that we're going to be able to add into our 2026 food system assessment. So it's going to make for a much more robust data set and outcome, of a report, but it's also giving us shared language, shared data, built relationships, trust, understanding of who's doing what so that we're no longer working in silos because everybody doesn't need to build everything, right? And being able to learn like, okay, what's Barnstable County going to do with their food action plan and based off of this information, and what's Plymouth doing and what's Bristol County doing, that's actually going to get us into a very different place 5 to 10 years from now versus all of us working independently. So this is a really robust regional approach to addressing the issues that we're facing with food and nutrition insecurity in our region. So it's super cool. I hope it works. Like, we're pretty far ahead. As Christine said, we've completed the care in Bristol County. We're about halfway done with Plymouth County. We're a good third into it with Barnstable County. We've just secured funding to do it in Nantucket County, and working with Norfolk and Dukes County to get their funding to do the carrot. And we've also hired our consultant that's doing the food system assessment. So the same group that did the food system assessment in 2021 will be in charge of taking all of this data plus secondary data that you get from like secondary sources like USDA and all of that, that will get synthesized into this next report. And I just want to also highlight the importance of us doing things like this because as you all know, and you probably remember getting, the updates that, some of the government federal agencies that have done these types of food system assessments are no longer going to be doing these food system assessments. So being able to really identify what is happening here and regionally, and then being able to have data and relationships that we can then act on is going to become all the more important in the years to come. So we're pretty proud of the work that's happening with this regional consortium. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. And then the other comment I'll make on the policy initiative within this working group and the importance of that and ACT encouraging donations of food to persons in need. Currently, we, like Christine mentioned earlier, we launched a Fields to Families gleaning program. And we have over 1,500 farmers in southeastern Massachusetts. That's Norfolk, Plymouth, and Bristol County, who always, have surplus crops because they have to plan for that because of issues and disasters and all sorts of things. And often those crops get left in the field if they don't have a market to sell it to or if they don't have the labor to harvest it. And so our gleaning program is, training volunteers to go out and harvest those surplus crops. But that shouldn't be on the backs of fishermen or farmers to just donate that food and not make any profit off of that. And so the importance of doing a few things, which is we provide stipends to every farmer that we onboard into that program. They get a $500 sign-on stipend, which isn't much, but it's something that we can initially give them. But this act encouraging donations of food to persons in need is really important because it will, if passed, and it looks like through the governor's task force that, we've been working on, it's going to get pushed forward. It will give a $25,000 tax incentive to farmers or fishermen that donate food to food relief annually. And so that's massive. So those are two really, a couple of important things to note.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks, Liz. That was good. Yes, Mary, you want to take yourself off mute?
I'm just wondering, is there a way to give us the person or how we would contact or support this particular act encouraging the donation of food? Is there a phone
Yeah,
that
I
you'll
do
keep up?
have actual links set up on our website. So if you go to, um, Liz, can you do me a favor? Can you go to our policy initiatives on our website for the SFPC and then there's a link that just talks about this bill. So all of our bills have their own web page, and at the very bottom you can click on a link, and that link takes you to the action alert, and it is still live, so you'll be able to contact your legislator about this particular bill.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions on this working group or the pieces that we shared? Okay. So next is what has happened with SNAP. SNAP's been a big issue this whole year, but it came into focus in October when the federal government shut down, which basically froze money going to SNAP. So SNAP is one of our policy priorities. So we are in the SNAP coalition. We work on SNAP issues. We do action alerts on SNAP to make sure it's funded or it's not cut. So this is really important. So we've been very busy in October, November, as advocates working on this, and for all the food pantries have been really concerned about this. So in Massachusetts, over 1 million or 16% of the population relies on SNAP. And our food insecurity rates are pretty big in the South Coast area. 48% of people in Bristol County are food insecure, 36 in Plymouth, 20% in Cape and Islands, and 18% in Norfolk. And food pantries found more resources to bring in more food, but they recognized it wouldn't be enough money to actually go get all the food that they need. SNAP funds were available, but the current administration chose not to release that. I don't know if you remember, but this is just the history of what actually happened. So we did a few things. We advocated to the Massachusetts congressional delegation to ask the USDA administration to release the November SNAP funds. Because there was emergency funds to use, the administration was just choosing not to use it. We then advocated to Governor Healy and the Senate Ways and Means to find money to pay for SNAP in November. We were thinking, well, if the SNAP funds aren't released by the USDA, then how are we going to deal with this in November at the state level? So we knew there was a rainy day fund. We knew there were other means that the Senate Ways and Means could find by cutting other pieces of money or finding additional money because it was money there to pay for money for SNAP in November, knowing that the state would not be reimbursed for any money used. The SFPC, the South Coast Food Policy Council, signed on to a state letter And we hosted a webinar on events through our emergency food resource meeting where we had Pat Baker going through what you can do as an individual, what you can do as a community organization to actually help move these two pieces forward of talking with our congressional level and at the state level about funding SNAP for November. But the good news is the federal government did release the funds when they lost a court case. As you know, a lot of these different pieces are moving through the court, not just SNAP. There's a lot of pieces that are moving through the court system, but they did release the funds. They were no longer frozen. At that time, we recognized that HIP was the only state program that was fully secure, even if SNAP was frozen. So even if you had 1 penny on your SNAP EBT card, you can access that full $40 to $80 monthly. So we recognize this is a pivotal piece of legislation. We really need to make this clear. And I think the state level legislators and the governor recognize how important HIP is now that they saw that if SNAP wasn't funded, what could potentially happen to people. And I think that crisis actually pushed HIP forward. So where are things right now? USDA currently is threatening to withhold SNAP funds again until the SNAP recipient data from DTA is released to ICE to review. But as advocates, we're not worried. They threatened before and walked it back, and Massachusetts has joined a lawsuit with 21 other states, and so everything is just frozen. There's no issue right now, meaning that SNAP is continuing to be funded. At the congressional level, what is happening is that a bill has been put forward, H.R. 6088, Restoring Food Security to American Families and Farmers Act. And the great news is that our entire Massachusetts congressional delegation has signed on to this to repeal the SNAP cuts from that big, beautiful bill. Right now, there are 199 co-sponsors. While this is bicameral, both the House and Senate have signed on, it is not bipartisan. So this is something that other states will continue to work on if they're not blue states, and hopefully we'll start working on this particular bill. Any questions about this? So this is what has happened just within a few months. And this is why HIP is even more important than we thought. And we hope that message came through clear to the governor for this coming year. So she fully funds HIP, and both the House and the Senate Ways and Means fully recognize that HIP needs to be a program that gets to the floor for a floor vote, which would be the next step in the process. So this year was all the testimonies and different committees for HIP. And next year it has to move through the House Ways and Means and the Senate Ways and Means and then goes to a floor vote. So a lot of our advocacy, this is just one priority, but it just shows this SNAP crisis really showed the importance of HIP. Any questions on this or thoughts? Okay. All right. So what's happening in this coming year? What are we doing? Right now, we're actually recruiting new community advisory board members from the different parts of the food system, and then we'll be onboarding them in the new year. And our Bristol County carrot will be done. We'll have put the data together, and we're going to have our community advisory board score it. So the community is going to be like, you're right, this is a huge gap area, or this is a huge asset area. And we have a scoring system that they're going to move through that. And every 2 years is a state candidate cycle, and we always run candidate forums for the candidates in our particular area. So we'll have another one in the late summer, early fall. We'll be releasing the Farm Coast documentary in the fall. We'll also be releasing the Southeastern Massachusetts Food System Assessment, and the Aquaculture Coalition will get on its feet and start running. So those are the new things. We'll continue all those things you heard. We're going to continue to do all those things. These are just the new things that we're doing in this coming year. And before I move further, any thoughts or questions on this? Okay. So one of the things that we're thinking about is the FSA, the Food System Assessment, will be published in late fall and will go undergo a strategic planning just like we did in 2021, 2022. And we'll have our CAB members identify priorities. What we decided, because we're bringing on aquaculture, is we're going to dissolve the working group and we're going to have those folks move into different working groups, and we'll move our priorities into different working groups. We decided this year, in the coming year, that we're going to focus more on the policy side and less on the initiative side because of trying to get this FSA up and running. So we're not going to implement more programs based on our initiatives. We're just going to really focus on the policy. So once we have the FSA, then we'll make a decision on a whole new set of priorities. Does that all make sense? So we just wanted to let you know that's where what we're doing. So that policy working group will be, oops, let me go back here. We're going to keep these priorities. Oh, here we go. We're going to keep equity in agriculture and the budget. Those will just be into different working groups, and the people that are in this working group will choose a different working group. So that's really the only difference that we have this coming year. Right.